weekly series where I interview women in all walks of life, all over the world. And we're going to be talking about how we do happiness. And it's going to just be this very, really casual conversation around the how of happiness. We all do happiness differently, and we all look at happiness differently. And so today I'm going to be interviewing my first guest, and I'm so excited. Woohoo! All right, so Shideh is joining us today. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Well, thanks. How are you?
Good, thank you.
I just had watched your video and you were sharing, and I loved this point that some people will say, how do you ground yourself before you do something you're nervous about? And I always still get nervous too, even though like lives I do all the time. But there's just something about if it's something different than your brain is used to perceive it as a threat and get you all nervous and overthink it. And you were like, yeah, so deep breaths may work for some people, but for me, taking action helps more.
Yeah, totally.
I love that.
I need to get myself to the action to get to the space of being able to take a deep breath. That's like, like yoga, for example. Like I really would like to be like a yoga person. And I do like doing yoga on occasion, but I have to like be in a very relaxed place already to be able to do yoga.
Yes.
And like have that be my relaxation. But like tennis, for example, like I'm obsessed with playing tennis. I've been playing a lot this summer and into the fall, and plan to like metamorphosis myself on through winter by continuing to play, because for me tennis is like I have a million things going on in my brain at a time, right? Like I run my business, I have an ER job, and then I have kids, and so my brain's always going, and to slow it down, tennis forces me to like put all that stuff aside. I just have to like focus on hitting that ball and running to the ball, which lets me let go of everything else. Whereas sometimes when I'm doing like something like yoga, those to-do lists just circle in my brain nonstop, and so it doesn't create that relaxation that I'm necessarily looking for, like putting down my like to-do list.
Yes, right. It's not engaging.
Yeah,
Sometimes you may choose maybe yoga, maybe breath work. It doesn't feel engaging enough to capture your attention, to really allow you to be laser focused on one thing. It's
yeah,
just doesn't quite get you there. Yeah,
yeah.
that's a good point about tennis. Um, so when it comes to happiness, and I know that you are a huge proponent of joy and positivity, I was hoping maybe you could tell our audiences a little bit about your background, like what you do, and really just like kind of kick it off with how you do happiness. Like, what does that even mean to you? How do you cultivate it? Because there's this big misconception for many people out there that happiness is just, some people have it and some people don't. Some people are happy people and they just got it. And the rest of us are just like, well, we just didn't get that. And reality is, so much of happiness is actually cultivated by us and our daily practices. And so I would love for us to be able to share with the world how intentional effort goes into how we feel. So if you could share a little bit about that, that would be great.
Sure. So my background is I'm an emergency room doctor and a coach for professionals. So as an emergency room doctor, I work here in Rhode Island. I work in the level 1 trauma center. So my day is actually not filled with a lot of happiness. It's a lot of trauma and sadness and holding space for other people's trauma and sadness. So that is kind of my professional life. And then I have started through kind of learning a lot about how to cultivate happiness. I've sort of developed a niche and interest in coaching professionals, helping them kind of figure out that, it's happiness is not just about like, happiness is not just this like fluffy thing to be. It actually is like what allows us to be really effective in our world. So that's kind of the other professional hat that I wear, as I coach a lot of people who have very high level, high stress jobs into learning how to get happiness and joy. And it's not just about being happy, because obviously like I'm not walking through the ER like being like, ha ha, like this person got into a horrible car accident, I'm so happy. Like definitely not happy, like, but really connecting with your true emotions. So like in that space, obviously like I, like it's obviously devastating to see people having all of these horrible things, but I have to wear my professional hat in that space. And so I'm not like sitting there crying. I'm like being effective, doing that work, but also honoring the fact that like that's actually a really special thing that I do, like that I hold, spend a lot of my day holding other people's hands through going through a lot of times the worst day of their lives. And so for me to be able to do that, to be able to like really give of myself in that way, that I have to balance that out by like creating things that like give to myself, let me have joy in my life, like, and that actually does create it. And what you're saying is 100% right. It's not just like this natural inclination. It's like dedicating time and effort to doing that, and realizing that dedicating that time and effort to doing that allows me to be so effective in my role in the emergency room, and in my role in all the other roles I wear, like as a coach, as a parent, that I have to have that space for joy and happiness so that I can kind of handle all the other emotions. I like to think about our emotions kind of as this spectrum of like, there's all the positive emotions like happiness, joy, but then there's all these negative emotions that exist in our lives, like stress and sadness. And for us to be able to hold those, we also have to be able to hold space for the other side too. And so creating that balance is super important. And,
Yes.
tennis is one of my main ways of creating that. It's a real great break for me.
Good.
So I love that. That's one of my techniques.
How often are you playing tennis?
I basically spend a lot of my day in my car thinking about how to play it every day. I do not play every day. I play probably 3 or 4 times a week now. I'm
Great.
sure it'll be a little bit less in the winter. But I do some kind of movement every day. Like, I think movement is key. Like, and it's movement. It's not hardcore exercise every day. It's not like, some days it's taking the dog for a walk for 15 minutes outside. But some days it's like swinging kettlebells for an hour. I love movement. I think movement really lets go of a lot of the stress that we hold.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. And especially with just defining it so is really important. I think people get the wrong idea that when we say movement, it has to be, 30 minutes of, losing your breath to exercise every day. And really it's just about the giving your body the opportunity to get out of your head a little bit and to choose something else that you're going to pay attention to or focus on. It just helps us shift perspective. It helps us just get out of the same spirals that we tend to be in, especially so many of us, myself included, working from home all day. I can literally spend days of every week going from my office to kitchen to bathroom to bedroom to office to kitchen, and I can just go on the same loop for days. And then if I get outside and I go for that walk, or I get down to the water, I just get into the woods, all of a sudden my brain thinks differently. There's different thoughts my brain secretes. There's different focus. My senses pick up things that I haven't been accustomed to all day. That's just like so helpful to get out of your head and the same loops that we get stuck on. So many people just get really stuck on perseverating on something and really ruminating on the wrong things, meaning just the things that bring us down, not that they're necessarily inaccurate. And so if we can just switch gears and get ourselves out of our head, it's so healing. Shideh, did you come from a happy family? Is happiness something that's just is it organic and natural for you? Is it how you were raised? Is it your current environment most of the time, maybe outside of work? Or is it something you actually?
I would say my parents are happy, like but I mean, their life story is not necessarily super happy. Like, so my family's from Iran. We came to the United States in 1987. So, I was born during war. So there was war in Iran, between Iraq and Iran. And then we came here. We were new immigrants. Like, and my parents, my dad was like 40 when we got here, and we're like restarting everything. So, like, I think they had a really good attitude about like figuring out how to make their lives happen. But like, our lives were not like easy, but I think they definitely, I would say, are good examples of like really like making life happen. Like, my mom would plan these trips to go to Disney World, and like, we had no money to go to Disney World. Like, we lived in Atlanta. We would drive with my uncle, two of my uncles, and my aunt, in like this big old Buick, and my mom would make all this handmade food, and they would go listen to timeshare talks to get the free tickets to Disney. Like, they could never afford a timeshare, but they just like go sit for 2 hours, listen to these people talk about it. And like, we would go to Disney and we'd think like we had the most amazing, and we'd like stay at probably like Motel 6 or something outside, way outside. And like, but we like loved it. Like, it was such a happy memory of like going to Disney with my cousin and my uncles and my aunt. And it's funny because now I live in a world where I can afford to do those things. And like, we think, oh, well, we have to stay at like the Princess Castle or whatever. And like, none of that is necessary. There's all this stuff, but I think I would say they're pretty happy. I think cultivating happiness, though, for me, really, I had a horrible accident, and so the day I got married in India. My husband's Indian, and I had two weddings actually, but my first wedding was in India. But I the day after, I got into this horrible accident where I fell at the Taj Mahal, like landing on my head, like had to get air. It was a lot of drama. I had a really bad, serious brain injury. They were going to operate on me in Agra, which is like kind of not a nice town. And so I had to get an airlift organized to get me to New Delhi, the capital. I ended up not having to have brain surgery, but was in the ICU for a week, and then was kind of grounded in India for 6 weeks. Like day one of being married to my new husband, and my mom stayed behind, and my mother-in-law and my grandmother-in-law, we all lived in one place together for 6 weeks, which it's a lot of pressure for a new couple.
Yes.
And then we came back to New York. Like I was a resident in emergency medicine, and there was a lot of flux about whether I was going to be allowed to even work again and what my recovery was going to look like. And it all worked out, but there was a lot of fear and certainly trauma in that time. And that's when I really started learning a lot about these tools of like how to, because I was really unhappy. Like I was very, very unhappy. I like in the beginning, I couldn't even walk, but then I like recovered from all that. I had all my cognitive function. I had to get cognitive clearance to do all that stuff. And there was a lot of challenges in doing that because of the way the insurance system was, whatever. And so finally, my mom was like, you need to get somebody to teach you. And I found this kind of coach who really like helped me to understand a different way of being, a different way of communicating, a different way of thinking. And that's what really opened my eyes up to this world of like, oh, like we don't have to be totally at rock bottom to optimize our life. And also realizing that like we all get this familial culture that we all have a familial culture outside of our like mainstream culture that we or whatever culture we come from. We have a familial culture of ways of being, of ways of interpreting things. That's just like what we learn, and we think that that's the only way because that's what we know. But right. When you start exploring that, you say, oh, well, this is like just a thought loop that just like has been handed down from generation after generation in my family, and it's optional. I actually don't have to take that on. And so it's kind of interesting to have learned that. And then when you learn that tool, like the universe kind of opens up to you. You're like, oh, this is just like the way I act in my life. I can do that if I like it and I like the results it's creating for me, or I can choose like a different thing that might work better for me or serve me better.
Yes.
So
that's amazing. I can't believe you had that horrible accident. That just sounds horrific. And to go through that as a new bride and in this just new chapter of your life is just incredible. It sounds like when we think about, like when you're talking about your parents too, and yourself, one of the key words that like comes to mind for me is resourceful. Like your parents learned to be resourceful. You learn to be resourceful. There is a thought in your head of there must be a way to do things differently. I can go to these talks and get my free Disney tickets to get to Disney. There's a goal, and I can be resourceful of how I get there. I can't live this way, this miserable. I choose not to live. There must be another way to live. And so I'm going to find a way. I'm going to hire a coach, or I'm going to research, or I'm going to step out of my comfort zone and become resourceful. And it just seems like that's a huge word for you and your family. How do you become resourceful? Because that's what sets so many of us apart. The difference between you going through an accident and recovering mentally, and then learning how to thrive, and somebody else who goes through a horrible accident and maybe doesn't ever mentally recover from it, most of the time, the biggest difference is the choice to try to see something differently. There's got to be a way that I can be happy again. This isn't how I want to live my life. And just even having that thought, that desire, or that drive allows us to make such different choices. But how do you have drive when you're in such a debilitated or compromised position, right?
Yeah, I think, one of the phrases my coach would always use, and I really love this phrase, and use it a lot. And I think social media is actually where we see a lot of this is like, can you hold the possibility that like things can be different? And if you just hold a possibility, even for like a millisecond, that something can be different than it is, when you hold that and when you feel that and like really think about things being different, it opens up a little bit of light in the darkness of like, oh, things don't have to be this way. And that's really, and like, and when you look at social media, you know, you follow, like if you follow like some of the people, entrepreneurial Instagram accounts, or you follow like these weight loss ones, and you see somebody who might look like you now and that you want to lose a bunch of weight, and then you see a picture of them where they've lost weight and they're like a mom who's busy, and like you're like, oh, this other busy mom who gained a bunch of postpartum weight could lose the weight. Maybe I can do that too. You hold that possibility. That's why we love those like before and after photos,
right?
like we all love that stuff, right? Or like meant from, you know, rags to riches stories. Like those things allow us to hold that possibility. We see it in somebody else, but then if we can hold that possibility for ourselves for just a second, it really creates shift. And I think that's where resourcefulness comes from. It comes from this idea of like, oh, things could be different. Okay, I can hold on to that. Well, let me look for one way that things could be different. And then that just snowballs into really changing lives.
Yes, just one way if things could be different. I think another place that a lot of times people get stuck is thinking that they have to believe 100% that they can do something. And I've always said to my clients, you don't have to believe 100% you can do something. You just have to believe that there's a chance things could be different. And then you build on every time that you can hold on to or cultivate or protect that thought that things could be different. Maybe if I just give this a try, or I just tweak this over here, things might be different. I don't think that you need to believe 100% it's going to happen for me to make positive change in your life. It's a major barrier that I think so many women in particular feel. It's just like, well, I don't see it as a possibility. I see this woman have a transformation of weight loss or rags to riches, but that's not me. I can't do that. She must have had a different circumstance than I do. And if we don't see it as 100% possible, we don't go for it. And so just like you're saying, create like a sliver of hope, a sliver of light, like just get your that pinky toe in the door to open it just enough to do just one tiny thing to see what's possible instead of the story that's already been written.
Yeah.
What about a hard day? So, Shideh, what would be a hard day for you to hold on to or to feel happiness, and how do you navigate those days? What is it that you do or focus on, or how do you navigate a hard day when happiness feels out of reach? Does that happen for you?
Yeah, it happens often. It's not unoften. It's not every day, but it's you know, I work in the trauma base. It's like it is hard, right? Like I see young people die of accidents that really like, and you see their parents crying and suffering, and like that is like a parent wailing for their young like 20-year-old that has their whole life ahead of them. That is something that like singes a little bit, not a little bit, a lot of it. And so when those days happen, I know that, you know, and in the emergency room, and I think in a lot of jobs we compartmentalize, right? Like you're the professional in the room. You're not sitting there crying of this 20-year-old dying. You're like working and helping the family. And so you put this like emotions in this box in this overhead compartment above your head, and you deal with it later. But so one of the things is I really recognize that I have to deal with those emotions. So on a day like that, I will text my husband and be like, I'm going to be a little bit later from home than whatever he's expecting me. And I will sometimes take a long route home. And I actually have a little bit of hard times because I'm so good at compartmentalizing, because it is required so often in my job. Sometimes it's hard for me to get in that space of feeling those emotions. So I will actually listen to like really sad music on the ride home to like allow myself to cry. And I cry. I have to feel that sadness. Like when I suppress it, because I have suppressed it before, I had this period as an intern where like I was waking up for like 2 weeks, every night in the middle of the night, checking to see if my husband was alive. And it was really annoying to my husband, who had to work the next day. Are you alive? And I didn't know what had happened. And it was because I'd, you know, worked a really busy trauma shift, and this was in New York, and I had a 40-year-old man who passed away. It was like in his early 40s. He'd had some kind of toe surgery, and he'd had what we think is probably like a blood clot. And he had come in, like he had not been on the proper medications to not get a blood clot. And like he just like walked in gray and collapsed like in the emergency room. And we tried everything. And his wife, this was back when we had a lot of visitors and stuff pre-COVID, his wife was like so upset. She was crying. So like, I have to call his parents who are overseas and I have to tell them that his son died. And I don't know how I'm going to do that. And I just like really felt for her in that moment. But then I had a bunch of codes, and we have people who kind of help family, or we had people in that hospital where they help family with that kind of stuff. So I had to move on to my next patient, and, you know, never really processed that thought. My husband's parents live overseas. I had like somehow linked those two in my head, and I'd never really fully processed it. So I was, and then as soon as like I actually went on a walk and I realized like what that connection was, I could let it go. I could kind of like grieve that. So that happens to me a lot. I do see a lot of sadness, and I take a little time out, because if I try to come home and deal with like my 2 5-year-olds who, you know, they have a lot of needs, they're kids, and I'm like in that frazzled state, I just need that time out. And I know I need the time out, because I can't show up with that kind of riding in the back of my head without acting like not the person I don't really want to be.
Right.
So I definitely take the long way home and I cry it out. And you know, crying is one of the ways I release a lot of my sadness. It just like comes out of my body. I feel a lot better, and then it's over.
Yes. And that's how you know you moved through it, that you're moving through it. You cry, you're like, okay, doesn't seem to be any more tears. I'm naturally kind of organically moving to the other side of it. Now maybe I feel ready to enter the house and go to the next chapter of the day. I love that you're speaking about crying, because I think, again, there's, you know, for so many women in particular, crying is seen as, you know, weak, or we don't want to be so emotional because we get judged for having emotions. And then here you are having so many professionals, experts be like, have your emotions, feel your feelings. And I think so many women are like, but I was taught not to, because it makes me weak and it makes people look at me a certain way. And so I love that you are just speaking to the power of releasing through tears, and just how healthy that is, and how it actually contributes to keeping you strong and resilient, and to be able to show up again tomorrow. And it would be way harder if you were keeping everything inside and you were this ticking time bomb that all of a sudden just spilled over or exploded at the wrong place, the wrong time. This is actually a contributor to your overall wellness. So I'm really happy that you're speaking about crying. I just think it's one of those tools that's like, don't talk about crying, like talk about the strength-based tools, you know, not the like sad weepy tools.
Yeah, well, the real strength is feeling your emotions, right? Like we have, like when you, like, emotions are like a piece of wood, you can submerge them underwater, eventually they're going to pop right back up. Like they will appear. And like I actually have a lecture that I give to residents when I talk about putting it in the overhead compartment. Like we compartmentalize, like that is what we do. We have to do that in the emergency room. We can't have like people, you know, crying in front of patient family members who are really like just lost their loved ones. So we put all these emotions above our heads on these overhead compartments. But if that overhead compartment gets too full, it will collapse on you at some point. So at some point you have to just unpack it. You got to take that stuff down and out. And so, you know, and there's also a lot of anger in the emergency room, just because there's a lot of things that feel unjust, unfair for people. And so the strong, like the emotions of anger, like I love a kettlebell workout. I love a slam ball, like, or tennis, like you just hit that ball, or a driving range, like you hit those balls out, you get that out of your body. You know, you get all of those emotions out of your body, which is where I think you hold on to them the most.
Absolutely. I love the overhead compartment visual, you know, just kind of imagine like you're just trying to shove more. And, you know, like when you're trying to shove your suitcase in and you're like, oh my gosh, my suitcase is too big and they're going to call me on it, but I'm still going to try to shove it in, just close it. And it pops right open. You can't, there's only so much we can hold on to before we spill over, before it leaks out in some way that we really don't want it to. So I love that. I love that. Cry more, everybody. Cry more. Feel like, let yourself release all the things you're holding on to. You do not need to carry the burden. I have one last question for you this morning, Shideh. So we're in the final quarter of the year. And so if there was anything that you could tweak, shift in your life, professionally or personally, that you think would help you end 2021 feeling happier, more content, more peaceful, aligned, whatever, what would it be, do you think? Does anything come to mind that you would Be like, you know what? I know I could shift this in my life and I would probably feel just even a 10% happier if I just focused on this area for the next couple of months.
Yeah. So I think part of this gym challenge that I'm taking is part of my way of making that happen. So this, like, I am a big proponent of healthy eating, and I would like to be even more healthy with my eating, and to kind of stick to the goals of this particular challenge, and just show me that for 8 weeks I can follow this pattern. That mine, I've actually tweaked it a little bit from the gyms because I wanted something that really fits me, not exactly the one that the gym has, but just showing myself that muscle of consistency, of doing something consistently for 8 weeks. Like, I want to grow my consistency muscle. So I love, and I think it would just feel so good to be like, oh my God, I did this for 8 weeks without fail and just showed up for myself for 8 weeks.
That's amazing. What week are you on now? And
we just started.
This week, what, week 1?
Well, yesterday was day 1. But
okay.
I really do think you have to set yourself up for success. Yesterday was my last day of vacation with my kids, and I was like, I'm not going to start day 1. I'm just going to start on day 2, and then I'm just going to extend it by a day. It's not a big deal.
Okay. Yeah.
That is actually something that has been a big shift for me, because I used to feel like you have to do everything exactly as someone else gave it to you. Otherwise, you're failed it and you're not doing it right. But what I realized is that that kind of thinking sets me up for failure, because I'd feel, like I don't want to get up at 6 a.m. to do a workout when I'm in a hotel room with my kids in New Hampshire. I can do that today. And it's not a big deal just to shift everything over by day 1, by one day.
Yes. Yes. Be rigid with your goal and flexible with how you get there.
Yeah.
I love saying that. I love reminding people of that. I love that you're living into that. It's something we could all live into more. It's so easy for our brain to be very just all or nothing about it. If it's not perfect, it didn't count, it didn't qualify, it wasn't enough. You can beat yourself up for not being, just so. Instead of just thinking, I'm going to be rigid with the goal, which is to complete this 8-week challenge with consistency as a muscle I'm strengthening. But I'm not going to be so rigid about how I get that consistent place. I need to do it in my way so that I don't just quit on myself or sabotage my progress. What does it entail for the 8 weeks? What do you have to, or what are you choosing to commit to for the next 8 weeks?
So it's 5 to 6 workouts. Some of them are done on a group. Like I do it virtually because that's the timing that works better for my family life. So 2 of them are done with the group, and then the rest are on your own. And then they have a meal plan which includes 5 meals a day and has specific foods on there that are high vegetable, high protein, healthy carbs. 5 meals a day is too much for me. I can't. It's too complicated for me to do. So I do my regular meals a day, which is, I'm an intermittent faster, so I do lunch and dinner. I love that. But really cutting out all alcohol for 8 weeks, which I love that idea. It's just kind of a fun challenge. And I look at it as that. It's a fun challenge. It's not for the rest of my life, or anything. But seeing if you can do it for 8 weeks, and sticking to whole grain carbs and veggies and protein, which is mainly what I like to eat anyways. But for 8 weeks, really cutting down on no sugar, no wheat.
Yes.
I'm excited about it.
No meat as well?
Yeah, meat too. Yeah, you can eat meat.
Sugar.
No wheat.
Okay.
No processed flours.
Okay. That sounds amazing. So you are going to be consistently, and you started this morning, or are you starting today?
I started today.
Started today for 8 weeks. It's an amazing commitment. So keep us posted on how that goes. I want to cheer you on.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. And I'm giving Thanksgiving Day as an exception. I don't know if that's part of the rules or not part of the rules, but I'm doing it because that's what I want to do. I want to eat all the things, and pie. I definitely want to have pumpkin pie on Thanksgiving Day.
That's right.
My mom, if you're listening, make sure there's pumpkin pie, please.
Don't forget pumpkin pie. Pay attention to this live for the pumpkin pie note. I love it.
Very important.
I didn't realize, Shideh, that we both are twin moms.
Yeah.
I didn't even I don't know why that didn't click for me. That's so amazing. Twin mamas. I love it.
I love it too. Twin mom is a great experience in learning how to operationalize your life, learning how to put systems in place so that you're not always stuck in thinking.
Yes, it's such an experience, I'm sure, for both ways, but it is amazing. Thank you so much for being my first guest on the How of Happiness and just sharing like such honest, candid stories about your life and about what happiness means for you and how you're going to keep it going, and just like a very real, authentic way. And I really appreciate your time and being here with me.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to watching all the other ones too and learning from all your other guests.
I know. I think it's going to be so fun. I think we're going to learn so much, and just to be able to have these conversations and to put out there for everyone to see like happiness is something that we work on. Happiness is something we choose, much like we might choose our spouse every day. We are all choosing how we feel and what we want to do and how we show up for ourselves. And there are harder days and easier days, but no one's safe from it. No one's, no one can, like, live in a world where those hard days don't exist. So I'm really glad that we'll be able to share many women's stories of how we do this the real way. Have a wonderful day. Have a great, I can't wait to follow you on this challenge. So keep us posted on social media, and I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Have a great day.
Thanks, Shideh. Bye.